To this now, EFF leader Julius Malema told supporters at the party's 11th anniversary celebrations in Kimberley in the Northern Cape that the formation of the party was not easy and was met with insults. Malema says the party exists for the improvement of lives of black people while helping them to own the economy. He says the party is a formidable organization that exists throughout the daily lives of people in all corners of the country and not only during election time. The 11th anniversary follows the party's first ever electoral decline in this year's May general elections.
This is 11 years of persecution. This is 11 years of an assault on our character as an organization and our characters as individual leaders. 11 years of tolerating insult against us and against those who stand with us. It has not been an easy journey, but we are happy that 11 years we have formed a formidable organization that exists in every corner of South Africa, and it doesn't exist only during elections. It exists on daily lives of our people in our communities. Comrades, we are in Kimberley. Boshadraka badile motlolo today mo Kimberley. Re a ba leboha ka mosebetsi o mobotse o re bona re leboha le lona ma fighters. Mara Kimberley a o e sheba ha e lebelle o ka re ke yona ye thomileng economy ya South Africa. The economy of South Africa started in Kimberley when they discovered diamond. They finished diamond and finished Kimberley. Today there is nothing left in Kimberley. Cecil John Rhodes is the one who wrote laws that disallowed black people to own the minerals of South Africa. It was Cecil John Rhodes who said the people of South Africa will not own the land because they knew that with the land comes the minerals. With the land comes the industries. They said you will never benefit anything that comes from the soil of Africa. Not only in South Africa. That's why we must always be in solidarity with the people of Africa, because Cecil John Rhodes did not only deny Africans access to the land in South Africa, he did this all over Southern Africa. Today, Cecil John Rhodes' grave is in Zimbabwe. When we take over the African continent, that grave must be returned back to England where it comes from. He doesn't deserve to be buried here in our own country and continent. Comrades, EFF was born because of that. The EFF was born because it wanted black people to own industries. It wanted black people to own mines, to own banks, to own strategic industries in our economy. EFF is formed to restore the dignity of our people. That's why we said, when we were formed 11 years ago, we said the ANC is going to die a natural death. And that death, we are witnessing it today in the Northern Cape, where the ANC is below 50% because of you, the fighters of the EFF.
Let's unpack that further now with political analyst Khaya Sithole. Khaya, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it. How difficult is it to keep a party in democratic South Africa alive for 11 years? I would imagine it's expensive, administratively burdensome, and highly competitive.
Good evening, and good evening to the viewers. So yes, I think what is a major issue in South Africa is just how vast the terrain of the country is, and also that means that in order to be able to maintain a political force across all corners of the country, you need to have significant resources. And those resources firstly come primarily in the form of obviously human resources. You need to have enough members across the different parts of the country to be able to spread that message. But also there will be many instances where even those members themselves need significant financial support in order to be able to execute on particular tasks, whether it's ongoing mobilization, whether it's ongoing engagements with communities in order for them to understand the communities better. So by the time you get to electoral campaigning season, they have an intimacy with the issues that affect the communities, and they can craft a message where it resonates. So it's not an easy exercise. And of course, the comparison is the ANC itself, which has had an entire century of really being embedded so well in communities that perhaps on a per unit basis, it will cost the ANC a lot less to be able to reach the same communities, to reach the same, capacity to reach out and mobilize than other new parties would do. So any party that has been able to start the journey and be able to last for a decade means it's a party that has found some form of a balance between obviously resource mobilization and resource allocation, and also obviously making sure that it remains front of mind in the eyes and ears of potential voters.
Yeah. Does the EFF have another decade of growth ahead of it? It received just over 1 million views in its 2014 debut elections. In 2019, it received 1.8 million votes from South Africans. And just about 1.5 million South Africans voted for the EFF in this year's elections. The EFF shed about 300,000 voters. Now, I'm not sure how big and significant the loss of 300,000 voters is in a single election cycle, but does it have ahead of it a future of growth?
So we do have the problem in that obviously we are working with declining electoral participation. So for as long as turnout itself is declining, it may well be that these parties, like the ANC, for example, will legitimately argue that actually the number of people that actively support us, or the number of people that would support us on an ordinary basis, is much bigger than the number of people that show up on election day. And I think it is the challenge that all the parties are facing, so that they should be able to say, wait, hold on, we should be able to at least mobilize all of those that already believe in us to show up on ballot day. And I think in the absence of a much bigger mobilization agenda supported by all political parties to make sure that everyone shows up to vote, we're going to be analyzing a very incomplete picture. So it may well turn out that of the 1.5 million or the 1.8 million, whatever number that previously voted for a political party, they still would have had obviously not, had we not witnessed the decline in voter turnout on that day. And obviously the question of how difficult voting may have been in this cycle, given the changes that we've seen, these are something that we need to be able to confront. And I think obviously all political parties are still trying to work out whether this is simply a general loss of confidence in them as political parties, or if a part of it is actually linked to the general, them being casualties of the declining turnout that we saw in the general election. And it's a very important question for them to be able to figure out ahead of the local government elections coming up.
Yeah, the EFF will be going to its third elective conference that they call the People's Assembly. This would be the fourth time Julius Malema is up for leadership in the party, if you include the interim structure that was set up before the 2014 election, right, which was set up out of the birth of the party, not through the people of the party choosing its own leadership. But this is the third time we're going to an elective conference. Julius Malema wants to retain the position as president of the party. Is that a good thing for the party, for the growth of the party? Or is there a general Malema fatigue that's seeping into the South African political psyche?
Well, I think if we're going to talk about the fatigue associated with political party leaders, we need to distinguish between the fatigue that outsiders may feel. So you and I may be casual observers of a political party and say, well, perhaps this party needs a change in leadership. whilst members of those political parties may themselves think that actually in the phase that we're in, whether they regard it as the initial phase of the party, we want consistency in that messaging and in the leadership so that we're able to grow the timber that is necessary to take over. Every single political party has to engage on that message based on obviously how it understands its own constituency. But obviously the question that always looms large ahead of any electoral cycle is the question of whether a party is essentially giving enough of an opportunity to some of its members to actually be given the type of leadership exposure and the type of leadership responsibilities that would make them natural successors at some point down the line. So I think the question of whether there's fatigue out there also requires us to be able to deliberate on, well, actually, is this a party that has said that we need to be able to spend some time with a particular leadership structure so that we build a wide enough network for us to be able to say at some point in time, this generation must step away and a new generation must step in. And that is something that is inconsistent across different political parties. I think the more mature political parties that obviously have a much wider leadership base are the ones that have been very clear that term limits are necessary in order for them to continuously renew the leadership. But again, you find that in most instances, we are renewing the figureheads. So you can see that there's a change in the president of a party. But if the underlying leadership cohort, whether it's called the Federal Council or a National Executive Committee, remains the same, you are actually essentially maintaining the same leadership structure.
Yeah.
And these conversations tend to focus on should the figureheads themselves be changing.
Yeah, Khaya Sithole, political analyst, thank you so much for your time. Really do appreciate that.